to our first roundtable meeting. As you can see, if anybody's got any questions, if they can put them into the chat, then I'll be able to take the questions from the chat. And if there's a particular question you think is really relevant, if you can like it, then we will take them in the order of the ones that have got the most likes on them downwards. So that'd be really useful for us. We do want this to be interactive, so we will open up the mics after we've had all the speakers, but while the speakers are speaking, we're keeping everybody on mute and using the chat. Feel free, as I say, to feed anything back in during the course that you want us to let you know what's happening. Hopefully the voice levels will be okay and that everybody's broadband will hold up while we do this round table. So just a quick introduction, I'm Sue Topolowski. I am the Public Affairs and Policy Chair for the CILT, and I also am the Vice Chairman of the Ports, Maritime and Waterways Committee, plus I run my own agency specialising in logistics and supply chain and have the nickname of being called the Queen of Ports. The idea today is look at something that is about to happen or is happening at the moment, which is how the UK warehousing space can cope with what's happening within COVID-19 and all the things it's bringing upon us. Obviously, there's two sorts of different challenges. We've got the food and the essential items, which have hit the challenges of actually getting supply and demand into the shops in time and needing vast amounts of temporary extra storage very, very quickly. Plus, we've got the other side, which is the side there everybody cannot sell it in their goods and have got now goods in storage with new goods arriving on the seas day by day. Added to this, if you look at what's happened from Cushman & Wakeman today, that they released the figures, that in the first half of this year, we saw a decrease of people taking commercial warehousing space. The availability of industrial space was slightly edged up towards the end of the quarter, but that was only because of people like Tesco's taking 300,000 square foot in Milton Keynes of additional space needed recently. But actually before that, space was down by about 22%. So not only do we have all this extra goods arriving, we have less space than we had this time last year. Also, deals are falling across the retail sector. 41 deals for non-essential goods have all been put on hold, which will also exacerbate the thing as we go forward. So that sort of sets the scene of where we are. There does seem some people out there that say they've got actually lots of space and they're waiting for people to fill it as well. So it is a mixed picture, but it doesn't seem to bode very well probably for the next 3-4 months as we get into the new norm. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, and that's going to be Tony Butler, who is a business consultant from Tony Butler Consultancy. Over to you, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Yeah, as Sue said, it's an ever-changing picture. So what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of an overview, really from the sort of the freight side of it and how you can look at options available to you. So I've just got a couple of slides. Oh, there you go, it worked first time. There you go, there's a bonus. And really this is for importers really to sort of look at what options are available. And before I sort of start off, one of the important things is to make sure that you as an importer really know and understand your supply chain. I know that sounds quite sort of an obvious thing to say, but from years in the industry, not everybody knows that. They just place an order and expect the goods to turn up, and that doesn't quite always work like that. Slightly easier for companies who buy on an FOB or an ex-works basis because you are in charge of your supply chain. But if you're buying on a CFR or a DP basis, then it's a little bit more difficult to work out who actually controls the supply chain. Now, I've been talking to a number of people, and the obvious one to start off with, and a few people have done this, is can you delay your order? You know, the obvious thing is to talk to your supplier. Obviously, with sort of a lot of goods coming from the Far East, Chinese New Year got extended for obvious reasons because of the COVID-19. which changed the dynamic for a lot of companies. But then sort of as the COVID-19 spread and became a pandemic, obviously China has opened up, whereas a lot of European and North American warehouses have closed down. And so a number of people are talking to their suppliers. Obviously, we've seen reported in the press that a number of retailers are cancelling orders, but other companies we're seeing in other sectors are just looking to sort of slow things down, maybe delay by 4 to 6 weeks. And that's the obvious starting point. Another good option is, if the supplier can't delay, can you hold the goods at origin? Again, this is more centred around the Far East than maybe North America or Australia or places like that. But origin warehousing in China is quite a big thing, and therefore the goods can come from your supplier, but then you can hold them at a lesser cost than you can in the UK until you need to call them forward. And that can be just in a straightforward warehouse or in bonded facilities. Depends where the goods are coming from. China is more complicated than other areas. A third option, which I know at least one shipping line is offering, and I'm assuming if one is, they all are, is a delay in transit option. And what is happening is that some shipping lines are saying, well, okay, well, let's ship the goods out of the Far East, but we'll ship them to Greece and hold them at the port of Piraeus. And the reason being is, again, because the cost of holding goods and containers in Greece is a lot cheaper than holding them at UK ports. And then it allows you to sort of slow them down, keep them away from the UK, and then call them forward as and when the supply chains start opening up and the goods are needed. If your goods are already nearly in the UK or out the UK, obviously there's always an option to store containers on the quays at the port. But that is not something that the container ports really want or are set up to do. Their business model is to move containers in and out and off the quay as quickly as possible. You can get a short period of free time on the quay, depends on which shipping line you're dealing with, which is 5 to 7 days. But after that period, charges mount up very, very quickly. Talking to one port, which is the port of Felixstowe, they are offering a solution for longer term storage, but as I put there, it's a minimum of 4 weeks. So if you've got a number of containers, you need to talk to your shipping line, don't talk to the port, talk to the shipping line you're dealing with, and you can put your containers. So what they'll do is they'll take them off the working area of the quay, put them in a holding area, but because it's outside of their normal operating area, that's why they want a minimum of 4 weeks, because it's sort of it's a bit more complicated for them to control the containers, and they don't want to be moving containers all the time, you know, to hold a container for a few days. If your goods are cleared through customs, there is always the opportunity to leave them in the container, but take them off the quay and store them at a facility away from the quay. Again, you're still going to have storage costs, but they will be cheaper than sitting on the quay, and you will have container detention charges. But again, you need to be talking to your shipping line. The final option around the port is obviously warehousing, and as Sue said there, it's a mixed bag. Companies who are full or nearly full. Some warehouses we see are protecting space for their regular customers. So, you know, and they're getting plenty of calls from people who are saying, "Now we've got 5 containers, can you unload them and hold the goods?" But it depends on their situation. But I think, as Serafina will point out later, there is space available, but it's not always around the ports. So you need to sort of decide where the goods are going, where your DCs are, and maybe look at where you want to hold the goods. So those are really the options. I think the most important thing is talk to your suppliers, particularly if they're controlling the supply chain. As I said, if you're buying on a CFR, then just talking to your freight forwarder or your customs broker in the UK, is great, but they may not be the ones that can make the decisions for you or pull the strings. But it's important that you talk to your freight suppliers as soon as possible, as early as possible within the supply chain. Don't wait for the goods to arrive in the UK or whichever port they're coming into within Europe. And obviously the other thing is when you're talking to sort of your warehousing options, then talk to Serafina and her team, because she's got some great solutions that can help you. Okay. I think we're going to, obviously the questions, please send them through on the screen, and I think we pass to Angela next.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. So good afternoon all, and thank you for the opportunity to join the session today. So the purpose of us wanting to be a part of this discussion today was not just to focus on what does our business do, but how do we take what our customers require and how do we couple that with our scale, infrastructure and technology to try and penetrate the market better. So yes, our business is comprised of 3 different divisions, which consists of distribution, post-sales and transportation. We know that in the marketplace we have a foothold, and we operate in over 120 countries. We have over 950 various stock holding locations throughout the world. However, if we look specifically at the UK, our main facilities are based in Tamworth, Coventry, Derby and Dewsbury. Those facilities consist of over 50,000 square meters of warehousing space, which we offer our customers. But the point which I'd like to focus on specifically, and it speaks to what Tony spoke to around his first point around the delaying of the shipments, is not just necessarily delaying the finished product, but delaying the actual composure of that product into its final stage. And in that being said, I'd like to focus on the value-added services which UPS offers our customers in the marketplace. The first one being around package solutions, then product customization, retail, compliance, kitting and inspections. The critical offering here is around the retail compliance. And what we say here with retail compliance is in our basket of value-added services, we look at products in their finished state, as well as saying, as opposed to bringing a finished product into the country, why don't we revise the product finalization and say, how do we delay that until we receive the customer order? So with that being said, we look at retail compliance and the e-commerce marketplace, and our business offers specific sound business processes that further support retail compliance into the UK. So our suggestion is for the participants today to consider re-engineering their supply chain and saying, as opposed to bringing in a product in its finished state, why don't we try reducing that into component parts? We therefore save the amount of monies on import duties, and we're able to demand a better rate for storage and distribution from our service providers. The benefit, however, remains that UPS can assist with the product finalization, and once again, only once we receive the order are we then able to finalize the product in its final state and ship it out to our customers with significant working capital and financial advantages. And I think that the next slide, and this is my final slide, focuses on what does the future look like. So we don't, none of us have a crystal ball, and we're able to predict what the future will look like. But what we're saying in this element is, let's focus on a new route to market, as opposed to going into having business pressure and going into possible administration. Let us review the opportunities to enter a new marketplace with an e-fulfillment model. So we know that the market in the UK is rather progressive in terms of the appetite for the use of e-commerce, and we would then further support business by saying we have the business processes, we have a plug and play solution which will further support the go live of a online e-fulfillment marketplace prior to the ultimate demise and closure of stores in high streets and in brick and mortars. So yeah, with that being said, what's critical here is that we would say that prior to any drastic measures in business closures, we would then recommend that product would be pulled through the supply chain from stores upstream into the supply chain and held in a dark warehouse where we're able to fulfill customer orders in that respect. And yeah, that's basically all from our perspective.
Great, thank you very much, Angela. And now it gives me pleasure to introduce Susan Morley from Morley Consulting Training, who is an expert in HMRC, VAT, and all things tax, and is going to add a new element into the debate and how we can actually look at some maybe tax deferment options. Over to you, Susan.
Arriving at airports and seaports is getting stuck at those airports and seaports. Now, it may be stuck, as Tony said, because people want to hold it there, and is actually not stuck by accident, it's stuck on purpose, but much cargo is being stuck by accident as well. And an element of that is because the importer, whoever they are, the actual importer, has either in this difficult time gone out of business altogether and no longer exist, or because they can't afford to pay for the import duty and the VAT when the goods are going to clear customs and leave the port. Now, this means that a lot of goods are ending up, and containers are ending up, in the customs authorised temporary storage areas of ports and airports. These are special places. Temporary storage is a customs procedure. It just doesn't just mean it's just temporary ordinary storage. Now, whilst it's in temporary storage, you don't pay any duties and tax because it's not imported. It's not come across the border technically. And therefore, we're getting quite a lot of backlog in what are supposed to be very small transit storage areas. They're not even warehouses in many cases. They're just simply transit storage areas. And they're not made for that kind of backlog. So this is now preventing new stuff that's coming in, getting into those temporary storage areas. So it can't be cleared through customs anyway, because it has to move through those before it clears customs. There's also a lot of costs. You're going to pay demurrage costs on the container. You're going to pay storage costs with whoever's temporary storage area it is. And you're not getting your goods. Maybe that's the idea. But equally, you're incurring debt. Now, that isn't a situation that's going to be able to be coped with long term. And HMRC know there are problems here to do with the duties and the taxes. So they've produced a set of easements, which are not necessarily very well known, but ought to be better known. What they've said is temporary storage is a special procedure, along with things like inward processing relief and customs warehousing. These are all special procedures. That's the technical name for them. And in temporary storage, you're only supposed to keep goods there for 90 days at a maximum. That is actually the legal limit, 90 days. And that is going to start to be exceeded very shortly for some cargo. So what they've said is the owner of the authorization for temporary storage can contact them for a variance. And that means, in this case, an extension to the 90 days. So if they were able to keep the goods in that temporary storage site, then they could have more than 90 days, which is not normally acceptable. But they have to do that individually. Each temporary authorization holder has to contact HMRC individually to get that permission. But there are also things that can be done by those temporary authorization holders to add new facilities to their authorization. So, for example, if they were able to identify another site where they'd like to put this temporary storage, where the goods do not pay customs duties and taxes as yet, then they can go to customs again individually, one by one, and say, this is another site. We'd like to put some temporary storage in. Will you approve it? Because it must, of course, be secure up to customs standards, and they must be able to ensure that customs compliance will be completed on that site. So they have to meet certain tests for the new site, but they can quite quickly have that new site authorised, or indeed sites, so they could expand their temporary storage areas onto different sites. So those are two options, an extension of the 90 days and an expansion of sites, which are available to those holding temporary storage authorisations. But there are also some other easements, because normally temporary storage is very, very closely controlled. And what they say here, you might have particular site opening hours on your authorisation. Well, you can change those if that is now better suited to you to do different hours. You can vary your authorisation to allow some of the procedures to be carried out remotely. Again, not previously acceptable. You can also vary your authorisation to say within my site, I want to swap where certain procedures are undertaken for Customs and Border Force to look at, because then that will guarantee social distancing, which in the normal setup we couldn't do. It wasn't set up that way. And Customs again will vary the authorisation to permit this. But you have to apply, you have to ask to get these permissions. You can do things like reducing dwell times, if you're able, to move cargo through. Quicker permission to progress the goods off the port, you see. And other things can be done. Now that's all very helpful for those who are authorised for temporary storage, and they might be able to pass those benefits to their clients. But there are some other things to be done to free up the blockage, which is the payment of duty and VAT. Because before the goods leave the port or the airport, someone's got to own up to paying the duty and the VAT. And this can be quite a substantial amount of money, or not that much, but if you're a company with no income anymore at this point, then any amount could be too much. And indeed, you may not really want the goods, because the goods perhaps you can't sell onwards anymore, because your supply chain has collapsed and your buyer has gone. Or they may now be the wrong season's goods, and are so worth a great deal less, shall we say, than you had expected them to be worth in the current situation. So what you can do there is, again, you can apply individually, importer by importer, to HMRC, and you can apply for time to pay. Now, this isn't a removal of the need to pay duties and taxes. It is a sort of deferred payment plan, if you like, where you can agree individually with Customs. If you can demonstrate hardship, you do have to demonstrate there's a certain amount of hardship, which is why you can't pay. And they will allow you to have extra time to pay. This could be weeks, it could be months. And importantly, you can have this extra time without upsetting your deferment account if you currently have one. A lot of major importers use a deferment account to pay duties and taxes, where Customs direct debit their account on the 15th day of the month following import for all of their imports in the previous month. Now, that could be a considerable lump sum for some people. It's duty and VAT added together. And that day of the 15th becomes a huge drain on your finance if you don't have any cash flow or no longer have the sufficient cash flow. And this is what you're being given time to pay. So it could be deferring that for weeks or months, or giving you a payment plan of X% per week or something like that to help your cash flow. That's going to be done, though, without impacting your existing deferment account, which means, because a deferment account has an upper limit, it has a maximum, and if you've not paid off last month's, clearly you would break and go above the maximum of your deferment account this month. So what they're doing is saying, if you get time to pay, you make your case and they agree, then you can still use your deferment account as if you had paid. So you don't get a backlog and a lack of use of your deferment account, which is very important to many people. But this isn't only available for people with deferment accounts. Smaller traders who might have been using a cash option or equivalent to pay their duties and VAT to Customs can also get time to pay. They have to make a case for their hardship and why they can't actually pay, but then they will be given permission and a payment plan, just in the same way as I described for the deferment account. But to do that, of course, if you're a cash-only buyer, you have to have an EORI number and you have to be registered with customs in order to pay cash. If you're not registered, you've got to do that step first. You've got to register and then talk about time to pay. Now, I have the details of the time to pay options, which hopefully will be coming up soon. Did that work? Yes. So now you can see there's a link for the storage solutions and other authorizations, which you can go on to read the full details available there and how to contact customs. But if you're doing time to pay, this hasn't been published widely on the internet because this is existing law. It's not a strange thing for customs to do, but it's normally only done with things like PAYE or corporation tax or VAT in the normal business process. Now they've widened it to import duty and VAT, which is not usual. So what they're using is an existing law, but they can't say there's a whole new procedure. There isn't a whole new procedure. It's an existing procedure, but expanded to import duty and VAT. So you can either call the duty deferment office or you can email them. Now, I would recommend emailing them because a substantial number of companies are contacting them. And as you can imagine, that phone line has a long waiting line and you may be on the phone for a very long time. So emailing them is also better because you've got evidence in writing of the date and time that you made your application for time to pay. And as we approach May the 15th, when the next set of money is due to be taken from deferment accounts, that could be very, very important to already have your claim in. You should be starting your discussion with HMRC now, not waiting until the 14th. You should be doing it now, so get that email in. It must include the reasons why you can't pay, reasonable reasons, hopefully, to do with the virus or your suppliers or your customers not being able to pay you or you not being able to move the goods on or sell them on. And put your case and contact them. There is also the COVID-19 helpline, but that has an even longer queue than the other two because it's a generalist line. So put your email in, and then if you don't hear back as quickly as you might hope, give them at least 48 hours, I'd say, then you could ring them up to chase what's happening to your email inquiry. If you're not using a deferment account, then the contact for that, if it's cash or equivalent, you can see is displayed there. It's an email. And again, you must make your case as to why you should be given time to pay, and then they'll enter into discussion with you. And you can negotiate a bit, I'm sure, to arrive at an equitable amount of time to pay. So those are the basic things I wanted to talk about and to share with you that are available to everyone who is an importer to help release that backlog at the ports and the airports where cargo is stuck the wrong side of customs and therefore is blocking other cargo coming in and filling up facilities quite quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. If you've got any questions, do put them on the chat. But I'd like to start off asking all our speakers just to unmute themselves so we can have a conversation. I think one thing we've learned is that people now understand supply chains that they never did before. And supply chains are going to have to reinvent themselves to be a new norm in the new world. Do you think there is going to be a change in the way supply chains operate? Are we going to see, as actually mentioned by Angela, that we're going to see more unfinished goods and part goods in the supply chain for the buffer? And if that does, what is that going to do to the warehousing environment? And Susan, from your point of view, how is that going to impact people on the fact of how much duty and tax they're going to have to pay? Maybe Angela, you'd like to start off?
Yeah, so most certainly, I think that the critical point is around social distancing and how do we continue with a normal lifestyle? How do we create a normal lifestyle, and how does logistics support that? So we've certainly seen an increase in the B2C type deliveries as opposed to B2B. So, you know, from an infrastructure perspective, how do we now scale up to support that? And how do we, from a business and a and a country perspective, how do we ensure that we have enablers to support GDP and business and overall economic growth? So yeah, there's certainly various points which we don't know what the future will look like, but we do know that the capabilities which we have as it stands can further support businesses in creating a new route to market and a new channel of distribution.
Lovely. Tony, are you seeing any changes of what people are asking you to look at?
I think it's a little bit early to say from the sort of the forwarding side. I mean, obviously the last time we saw a big change in the way that people sort of purchase goods for import was during the financial crisis, when people realised they were holding too much stock all the time, and therefore changed their supply chains to cater after that. So they went more to lesser stock holding and more of a just-in-time solution. I think this is obviously the whole thing here is showing the reliance not only for the UK but the world has on China, so that when they sort of their Chinese New Year got extended past the traditional 2 weeks up to sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks, what a strain that put on supply chains, and obviously now it's swung around. So I think there will be changes, but I think it's a little bit too early to say from a freight. I think everybody's got to see how we come out of this and what the picture is like. And I think a number of people have said there, who's left in the market, which customers are there? Do we go from street retail to more sort of e-commerce?
Okay, and Susan, from a tax point of view, if we see a lot more unfinished goods coming in, is that going to be more problematic from a tax and duty or less?
Well, every item, be it a component or a finished item, has a different tax rate, a different duty rate. Probably got the same VAT rate for the most part, although some things don't have lower VAT rates, but for the most part the same. But the duty rate would vary depending on the actual item that is crossing the border. So some of this depends on whether the work that is being done to take componentry and turn it into finished goods is done before you clear customs or done after you clear customs. And there's a choice that can be made there. And the UK is looking at opening 10 free ports as part of Brexit, which means work could be done before you clear customs. And then you'd be paying duties and taxes on the finished item. But you can import components and pay duties and taxes on those. Perhaps that would be cheaper for you. This is something that has to be looked at and worked out. And at the moment, we don't have the duty rates for post-Brexit. We only have the duty rates for today, because the duty rates that were issued as for the no deal are no longer applicable. We will have a different set of duty rates for the 1st of January next year, and we don't know what they are yet. So we're only speculating. I mean, you can't do the maths for the moment. But there are choices to be made, and you would flex your supply chain accordingly. There are also choices to be made. There are many other customs procedures other than temporary storage. Inland processing, for example, inward processing, where you don't pay duties and taxes until after you have processed your raw materials into a finished product. And those goods don't have to be kept in the port. That is, you can move them out of the port, you can move them to an importer's own facilities or any facility really inland that is appropriate, and you do the processing work there and don't sort out the duties and taxes till the end of that. Customs warehousing as a subset of ordinary warehousing is another way of delaying the duties and taxes. So we're already seeing a rise in customs warehouses, which are specialist warehouses approved by HMRC, because people then realise they can hold goods there without paying duties and taxes. And the beauty of it all is you can mix and match your special procedures. So you could go into a customs warehouse to start with, move the componentry onto inward processing, and put the finished product back in the customs warehouse, waiting for orders, without ever having to pay a penny in duties and taxes. So these things can all be sort of knitted together, but this takes an understanding not only of the supply chain, but of the financial impact of what you choose to do. So it's not just, if I may call it, a wheels and trucks discussion, how fast, how cheap, how soon, that sort of thing. It's also what's the tax impact, or should be. What's the financial impact of doing this and exploring the different options? Customs has somewhat come to the fore We were always known as the dark arts because nobody knew we existed really, the people who did customs. That was just something that happened in a back room somewhere in the basement. But now people are talking about customs and how it's affecting post-Brexit trade. That's brought it to the fore. The new crisis has brought it to the fore again because, of course, it's finance and people are desperate for finance because they're not getting paid. And therefore, we've come to the fore again with options, easements, and actual just normal, what we would call normal options, like inward processing relief, that actually delay the need to pay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susan. I think that actually leads us nicely into whether free ports actually can be reinvented to a new British way of doing work, and maybe another conference or seminar we can hold on a round table on another day. I'd like to bring Serafina in here now just to tell us a little bit about what she's finding in the marketplace from her point of view.
Yes, I mean, as I think, as Tony said earlier, there is, in my mind, there is like a mixed bags at the moment. The situation is that we do have, warehouses which they look completely full, but there is also plenty of space outside ports. And I mean, this is where one of the things that people can look at, you know, having the goods are not necessary to be stored close to the port. Maybe they could be stored, be outside the port, maybe close to the customer. Because from the point of distribution, they may be able then to save cost and deliver goods as fast as possible as well. So just to go back to what I just said, in LogistCompare, we do have warehouses there, so which they do have the space available. So if you're really struggling for space, you can come to us and search on our portal, because the other thing, what we are doing, we put you in contact directly with providers. So there is no intervention of middlemen. So you'll be able to liaise directly with providers, which will speed up the process, especially when you are looking for a fast solution to your space requirements. So yes, I mean, we can help you. And on the other hand, of course, I mean, my background is in logistics. So if you need additional support from the logistics side, you're still struggling, I'll be happy to help you out and fund warehouses or any other logistics support you may need.
Lovely, thanks, Serafina. We're going to do a quick poll just before we finish the seminar this afternoon, just to get some idea of where people feel from this call we are on the situation of the warehousing space. As I said, it seems to be mixed, particularly if you're involved in the food, grocery type of thing. I mean, the Cold Storage Federation have said today they reckon we're going to run out of space within the next fortnight of chilled and cold and frozen storage space. On the other hand, there are people, as Serafina says, that have got quite a lot of space within their warehouses and actually looking at a new business model. Maybe before they haven't actually sold that space, they've kept it for themselves, but now we're all looking for new ways of earning money. They can open up that space and earn some money from dead space that's in their warehouse that they hadn't contemplated before. So maybe there's opportunities, and maybe people need to think outside the box a bit differently. I think the one thing that is 100% certain is that our supply chains are going to change. Our way of doing business is going to change going forward. And this is a reset button we've got, but for once we've got the opportunity of hindsight. So we've got a lot of knowledge and details that we can bring with us on this reset. So as we progress through this, I think the idea, Serafina, is to do some more of these conferences and seminars, looking to explore opportunities. If anybody wants to say anything from the people that are listening in, if they can either put up their hand or unmute themselves. Angela, I see you have. Do you want to say something?
No, I just gave you a thumbs up.
Oh, good. Thank you. Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so if anybody else wants to say anything, let us know. But the poll should now be up in front of you. Please do fill in our poll. Let us know these items, because it will help us going forward. And hopefully you'll join us on the next seminar. So thank you all very much for taking part, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Is it just us left on here now? Thank you, Graham. That's very nice. How does everybody think that went? You can, if you want to unmute yourselves.
I think, to be honest, it went well. The actual presentation went fine. These are the results, isn't it?